Okay, so how did things progress after you got out of that first meeting?
So another long pause. So that, there was another, it must have been close to a month, I think, until I heard from anyone.
Mm-hmm. Union included.
Union included. We were kind of waiting. So that was the step one of the investigation meeting. I was anticipating that I would be called to some sort of a part two of the meeting, and the message from the union was still, okay, then let's get through this, and then we'll proceed to the back to work meetings, to the accommodation meetings. So that was still floating around in my head, that okay, just got to get through this, and then I'll get back.
Right. So this is just my guess, is that they expected you to go into that meeting and somehow it would come out that you had a substance use problem, and then that would solve the problem for them, and they would be able to proceed with what they had ready, whatever they had ready to proceed with.
Yeah, exactly.
When that didn't happen, they had to regroup, and I guess they didn't have a plan B. It took them a long time to figure out what to do, and your union I guess they didn't know what to make of it. What did they tell you? Like, you must have been asking how it went.
Yeah. And they didn't know what to make of it. And there was radio silence on the other end. Their requests to proceed with both of those meetings were unanswered. And so I waited. And at this point, I was still, I was off on long-term disability. So I was being paid by the insurance company.
Right. And you got to think from the insurance company's point of view. I mean, I know what those guys are like. As an entity, they're constantly watching and running the numbers, right? So these types of pauses that are kind of nonsensical, or at least if there is a reason for them, I don't know why it can't be done in a more efficient manner, but there could be a reason for it. So the amount of money that they're shelling out, that they might not have to, you'd think that there would be pressure from them, but I don't know. It might be they might be tap dancing around the issue as well, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would wonder what those closed door conversations are like about that, and if there is pressure there to proceed and to as they're watching the numbers tick along.
Yeah.
So interestingly, though, it was about a week or two before I was called back to the part two investigation meeting. I got a phone call saying that I was cut off pay. That as of this given day, I think it was a Friday, I was cut off from receiving long-term disability pay.
Okay. Did they explain
no
how that was possible? Oh, okay.
No, there was no explanation. They said until the investigation concludes, you're not going to be paid. Now, I was being paid. I was under workers' compensation, I'm calling it, and they took over payments, and that was quite seamless. So there wasn't actually financial stress there.
Okay, so that's how the short of it is, that's how the insurance company dealt with it. They bucked that right away. They passed it on to WorkSafe.
Yeah, and they knew that they would take over payment, and
right. Okay.
But still without explanation of what was going on.
Right. So there must be communications flowing back and forth as to what's really happening here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why would insurance, if they didn't suspect that something was either going to happen or something, I would say criminal, but something negative was going to come out of these investigations, then why would they cut you off?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Isn't that like that? They shouldn't be able to communicate like that, because that would be a confidentiality breach. Correct.
Exactly. And again, going back to what we mentioned a few moments ago about that, they very much operate under the disease model for addiction. for better or worse, I know that we disagree with the disease model part of it, but they treat it as such. They treat it as a medical condition, I'll say. Yet it is not treated the same as a broken leg or a back injury is. Like there's a certain liberty that is taken with that. And so I can't imagine another circumstances. You gave the example of the person with diabetes who's maybe collapsing at work, where until things have concluded, where they would be cut off like that.
Well, imagine if it was a cancerous brain tumor,
right?
Like who wouldn't sue immediately? What do you mean you're dropping my disability? Why? What? On what grounds? It just, you would at least expect some kind of an explanation as to what's going on.
Yeah. So my pay was stopped. It was taken over by workers' compensation, and then I waited, and then was eventually called in to the second meeting.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, with the insurance company that you had at work there, you were classified as off work on disability, long-term disability, I guess. Yeah. And then when that got passed to WorkSafe, was the classification the same, or did it change?
Yeah, but it was the same. But WorkSafe had accepted my claim, and they do accept claims for addiction and substance use related to trauma and stress caused by the workplace.
Right. So, whereas the other insurance company does not.
Correct. Yeah. And so this was the easiest. I mean, that part of that transition over to them paying me was seamless and stress-free, honestly. Like it was just very fluid.
But it's very strong evidence, again, that insurance company knew stuff about your medical situation that they shouldn't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that the insurance company is at the whim of the person at human resources saying, cut it off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Just interesting. That's all.
Yep.
Okay. So where are we here? You're going into getting ready to go into the second meeting.
Yeah.
So how did that, was it the same thing where they just basically called you up and said, "I want you to come in a couple of days. We're going to talk again"?
Yeah. And so by that point, and by that point, my pay had been cut off. So the union had woken up, and they were, very in a heightened state for me. So there were more conversations, and there were higher up people, more powerful people, I'll say, within the union who were brought into the conversation. And the outcome and the way that first meeting I had, where I said I didn't recall anything, that came into the discussion, and it became quite obvious that there was a disconnect there, that half of the union involved in my case felt that I should still say you don't recall, because based on those charts, I didn't recall. And the labor relations officer said, just pour it out there. You got nothing to lose. And they didn't agree with each other. And I was sort of in the middle of this conversation. And so it had to come down for me. I think I could have, at the end of the day, I was the one who was going to be speaking at this at this meeting. And they did sort of leave it up to me to make that decision. And I'm glad that they did. So I weighed that out. And someone in my life said to me, "What do you need to do to ensure that at the end of the day, when you walk out of that second meeting, your head is high, regardless of what the outcome is?" Now, at this point, I'd been cut off pay, so I had a pretty good hunch that this wasn't going to go well. I knew that I was going to walk into a storm here. Mm-hmm. So that thought stayed in my mind about, keeping my head up at the end of the meeting. At the end of the day, it's myself that I have to live with. I'm prepared to live with the consequences of that. But in terms of what would be better or worse for me, sitting with that and not just speaking my truth would have been worse.
Right. I just, as a question about the evidence that, they had these charts there were discrepancies. Was your union aware of any other evidence that suggests that there was a problem going on?
No.
No. Okay. So they're going on the belief that that's all there is. So therefore, if you wanted to continue to say, I don't know what you're talking about, it would be very difficult for your employer to move forward.
Yes.
Okay.
That was exactly. That was the notion of half of the union. And the other half felt, well, just lay it out there, be honest with them, and then we'll move forward however we can based on the result of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But to our knowledge on our side, there was no information that said that they had more on me, so to speak, than those charts. Correct.
Okay. So do you want to take us through that meeting and describe what happened?
Yeah. So in the second meeting, I was called in, and again, it was just my manager and human resources, and myself and my union representative, and I was read a termination letter, stating that the relationship had been fractured beyond repair, and based on the fact that I didn't answer the questions that were provided to me in the first investigation meeting, the questions around those charts, that it wasn't forthcoming with information, and was deemed to be sort of a non-participant based on that they couldn't go on with me being an employee, and so I was terminated. My manager was crying as she read that letter.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, so then there was a pause. And they took a brief sort of recess for me to think about what was read to me. And the brief discussion was, okay, now what do you want to do, Corey?
Mm.
And again, that kind of thought about, how do I need to walk out of here feeling like not like a complete failure and not like a complete, just like I have lost this whole thing. I'll just go for it. And so when they came back in, they said, is there anything that you want to say that could salvage this relationship? And I said, it's all true. I was taking medication from work. I was taking medication at work. I was intoxicated at work. I messed with the charts. I did all of these things that you've accused me of. In fact, I confessed to more than what they had on me, by far. And I think that I'm sure that the union steward had some palpitations as I just sort of laid it all out there and kind of went beyond what just was, because they didn't have proof that I was intoxicated at work. They just had these errors on the charts. And I said, I was intoxicated at work.
At that moment when they left you to think about things, you probably realized that would not stand as far as a termination process, like without more evidence than they had, that it was obviously a ploy to try to shake you up.
It was like it felt like a game of chicken, like who's gonna flinch,
right? So you took that into consideration and realized that had you wanted to go that route where you're forcing their hand constantly, then in reality, they probably would have lost. They would have lost that battle anyway. But you weren't thinking in those terms at that time, and you were starting to think about the bigger picture. Yeah.
In my mind, though, at the time, I was also thinking, like, but again, aren't they saying that this is a medical issue? Isn't there an insurance company that is accepting that this is a medical issue? Didn't they send me for this treatment and back to a doctor to confirm that I'd been cured of this condition?
Mm.
So then how can they fire me? But you're absolutely right that my thinking at that time was bigger picture. I had to, for me, my choice was to think about how to put myself back together, how to not end up with more moral distress and misalignment with my values and with that kind of, we talked about cognitive dissonance, and to continue to deny, I felt, would have given me endless sleepless nights.
Hey, everybody. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.